Fresh is a 2022 film. It's only available on Hulu or Disney Plus. Now, I didn't know anything about this film. I knew it was a horror film, but I went into it blind. So this is going to be a horror, no, it's a horror film. This is going to be a spoiler review for Fresh, because I really want to get into it. You can't talk about this film without getting into spoilers, really, because it kind of changes your experience if you try to go in knowing a little bit. But basically, our movie is about Noah. She is a young woman trying to traverse the dangerous world of online dating. She has a really bad blind date at the beginning with a really terrible date who just exhibits so many red flags that it just, you know, didn't seem realistic. But either way, she hates that. But at the grocery store, she meets the charming Steve. He's a guy who chats her up and basically says, hey, you know, this is cliche, but can I have your number? And then, you know, they meet, they have a fantastic date, and they have sex. And after a couple of dates, he invites her to go away to Cottage Grove. And then he drugs her, though. He gives her a drink at his house, drugs her. She wakes up handcuffed and chained to in a cell, basically. Not like humane, like giant iron chains, but like a little thin chain. And she thinks it's a joke, but he sits down and he tells her what he has in store for her. Steve is a cannibal. He is going to sell her meat. He basically kidnaps women after seducing them, and then he keeps them alive and cuts away pieces of their body so he can sell to his rich clientele. Very disturbing Hannibal-like plot. So that's basically like the concept, and then the credits roll. The opening credits don't actually appear for a good half hour. And then basically Fresh continues with her talking with Penny, her cellmate, on the other side. She can hear her, who's lost a couple of body parts, but her friend Molly is her black best friend, who thinks that her messages are kind of sus because Steve's using her phone. So she tries to investigate and find out more about Steve, and that's kind of like the B plot. And then essentially Noah loses hope, and then she sees a message written in a magazine by a former victim that tells her to keep fighting. So she decides to intrigue Steve by pretending to want to try human flesh. And this is kind of where the movie kind of falters a little bit, because immediately after she has a meal with him and she tries human flesh and pretends to like it, we see her throwing up. So obviously she's not drinking the Kool-Aid, she's not going to the dark side. She's literally playing him, and that kind of loses its psychological factor, because it'd be cool to see if, you know, she's willing to be a sellout of sorts. They should have played up that theme where, are you willing to like sell your soul to save yourself and screw over all the other women that he would kill? And that's kind of like something that's explored with his wife. Steve is married to this woman who's missing a leg, so it's assumed that she was a victim that became a docile sort of hostage wife, and they had kids together. Accomplice of sorts. That's never explored. Anne is a really underutilized character played by Charlotte LeBon. I like her. But basically Molly gets captured by the couple, and Noah continues her seduction of Steve and then bites his dick off. And then she basically, that's kind of like where the movie kind of falters, because it literally goes from like tension, psychological sort of games to just straight up survival thriller. And I don't mind that, but it's really extended. They have this great fight scene in the kitchen, but then it keeps going, and then the dialogue totally turns into crap. It's really weird, because like the underlying theme is that like the women didn't do anything wrong. They just they're trying to paint, you know, the dating scene as like a horror for women, but in the most extreme kind, you know, like someone who literally kidnaps you and wants to eat you. So I understood that, but the dialogue at the end gets really, really preachy. The movie tries to like throw the themes down your throat. It's really unsubtle. I really didn't like it. You know, it just, and it ends abruptly. A lot of like loose ends too. For example, Penny's got some bad dialogue. We only see her once. They never show her until the end. There's like a servant guy who's with Anne, and he just disappears. And there's also Paul, a bartender that helps out Molly. He disappears too. He just goes, I'm out. And they try to have those themes too much, and they try to shove it into your face, and it gets really like annoying. The movie also ends abruptly, despite being like a full almost 2 hours long. I just felt the ending could have been a little bit better. If they finessed it a little bit more, the movie seems to work really well when it puts all of its not pressure, when it leans into the good performances of Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar Jones, the movie works. They have great chemistry. This is almost like a fine line between a rom-com, a black comedy, thriller, horror hybrid. So it's a little bit, you know, like Sebastian Stan's doing his whole Patrick Bateman thing. It's really great, but the movie, you know, doesn't have enough body horror. And even Wikipedia describes it as a black comedy thriller, not even a horror. I think IMDb calls it a horror, though. I'm going to check right now. It's just, yeah, the tone, it's the same, but it's more of a black comedy satirical film. They have all these little, like, shots of, like, rich people eating the women and their houses and stuff. Yeah, it's described as a horror thriller on IMDb. So, Fresh, you know, I liked it for the most part. I enjoyed the ride. You know, like, I had no idea what the movie was until half an hour in, and then you get the cool sort of seduction where she's got to use her feminine wiles, which is a theme that someone says at the beginning of the movie, but then they really dropped the ball with the ending. So I give Fresh a 6 out of 10.